Sasha Bennett had always been the kind of woman who stood tall, even when the world tried to weigh her down. Born and raised in a modest Jamaican town, she was raised by parents who believed in hard work and self-respect. After her father's sudden passing from a heart attack 3 years ago, Sasha became the emotional anchor for her grieving mother, Marcia. While many of her peers settled for local jobs or early marriages, Sasha dreamed bigger. She pursued her education fiercely, eventually landing a corporate job in Montego Bay with a regional tech firm. Her ambition burned brighter than anything around her, and yet, despite all the success, there was a quiet longing for love, a connection beyond business reports and corporate deadlines. 5 years ago, that connection came unexpectedly during a volunteer outreach program in Kingston. Sasha had signed up for a 3-month community development project, working with at-risk youth and underprivileged families. That's where she met Dwayne Russell. Dwayne was nothing like the polished men Sasha usually met in her circles. He was rough around the edges, tall with a lean build, dark eyes full of stories, and hands worn from hard labor. At just 23, he was juggling multiple jobs, car mechanic by day, bartender by night, all to support his 2 younger siblings after their mother walked out and their father fell into alcoholism. But there was something about his honesty that disarmed her. He didn't try to impress. He just spoke the truth, raw and real. He didn't have a university degree, but he had wisdom from the streets, resilience carved from hardship, and a quiet sense of loyalty that tugged at Sasha's heart. They spent hours together during the program, laughing, sharing food, talking about their dreams. For Sasha, it was refreshing to be seen not as a businesswoman, but simply as a woman. For Dwayne, it was the first time someone looked past his poverty and saw his worth. What began as friendship turned into something deeper. By the time the program ended, Sasha had fallen for him hard. Their relationship wasn't welcomed by everyone. Friends warned her, he's from a different world. But Sasha trusted her instincts. Love to her wasn't about pedigree, it was about soul. A year later, they got married in a simple church ceremony. Sasha wore a plain white dress, and Dwayne wore a borrowed suit. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. They moved into Sasha's childhood home with Marcia, who had her own reservations. Marcia was a proud woman in her mid-40s, hardened by the death of her husband and wary of strangers, especially ones who hadn't made something of themselves. At first, the air at home was tense. Marcia kept her distance, giving Dwayne cold, measured glances. But Dwayne, ever patient, chipped away at her skepticism. He helped with house repairs, cooked on weekends, and was always respectful, never overstepping, never loud. Slowly, Marcia's walls began to crack. She started laughing again at dinner. Sometimes she even asked for his help in the garden. Against her better judgment, she warmed to the man who made her daughter smile. Sasha's career, meanwhile, took off. Her company started assigning her to regional projects, first in the Caribbean, then abroad. The money was better, the recognition rewarding, but the travel kept her away from home for weeks at a time. Still, she trusted Dwayne and her mother. They seemed to get along, and the household felt stable. When Sasha was offered a prestigious 1-month assignment in the UK, she hesitated. She looked at Dwayne one evening as they washed dishes together, unsure. "Are you sure you'll be okay here without me?" she asked. Dwayne smiled, drying a plate. "I'll take care of everything. You just go shine like you always do." Marcia, overhearing, gave a nod of reluctant approval. "Go to your job, girl. We'll manage." With that reassurance, Sasha packed her bags and boarded a flight across the ocean, never suspecting that the life she'd returned to would be unrecognizable. The morning after Sasha's departure was quiet. The house felt strangely hollow without her voice echoing through the halls, without the hurried sound of her heels against the tile floor. Dwayne woke up early, brewed coffee for 2, and made breakfast like she used to on weekends. Marcia joined him at the table without a word, and for a few minutes, they simply ate in silence, 2 people brought together by circumstance, now forced into a daily rhythm without Sasha as their bridge. Over the next few days, Dwayne found himself stepping into the role of the house's silent caretaker. He fixed the leaky faucet in the kitchen, oiled the squeaky front gate, and even painted over the water stains on the ceiling that had long been ignored. Marcia, initially distant, slowly began to acknowledge his efforts. She'd leave a dish of food out for him after work, and sometimes, when he returned from errands, he'd find her waiting on the porch, sipping tea. By the second week, a new kind of routine had formed. Dwayne would come home with groceries or supplies, and Marcia would be in the kitchen humming old reggae songs, preparing dinner. They began eating together each night. Just the two of them, candles flickering in the soft breeze from the window, as if trying to chase away the strangeness of their new companionship. One night, as rain drizzled softly against the windows, Marcia pulled out an old box of vinyl records from the hall closet. "These are my husband's," she said, her voice low and thick with memory. Dwayne helped set up the player, and soon the room filled with the soft crackle of vinyl and the soulful voice of Alton Ellis. They drank that night, just 2 glasses of white rum, but it was enough to lower their guards. Marcia began to talk about things she hadn't said out loud in years. About how the house felt too quiet after her husband passed. About how watching her daughter build a life while she stayed behind made her feel irrelevant. "I look in the mirror some mornings and don't even recognize myself," she confessed, swirling her drink in the glass. "Sometimes I wonder if I'll just die in this house alone." Dwayne sat quietly, watching her from across the table. There was something in her eyes that mirrored his own, a loneliness that never really left, no matter how full a house might seem. He poured them another round. "She's different now," he said, suddenly breaking the silence. "Sasha, always busy, always thinking about the next job, the next flight. Sometimes I feel like I'm just a placeholder, something convenient to come home to." The emotional weight between them thickened. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't even sexual at that point. It was raw human vulnerability. Two people stripped of pretense, sitting in their sadness, finding a strange kind of comfort in each other's honesty. Then came the rainstorm. Heavy and relentless, it beat against the windows like a warning. The power flickered, then went out. Marcia lit candles around the living room. The record player stopped. The house fell into silence, broken only by the sound of thunder and 2 sets of breathing. They were sitting close now, side by side on the couch. Marcia turned to him, her eyes glassy. "We should stop drinking," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. But neither moved. The kiss came slowly, almost like gravity pulled them toward it. A brush of lips, hesitant and unsure. Then a second, and by the third, it was too late to pretend it hadn't happened. The kiss deepened, the silence thickened, and the tension that had been building for days finally burst into something physical, something desperate. They didn't speak afterward. Dwayne left the room quietly, went to the guest room, and shut the door. The next morning, the house was heavy with shame. Marcia avoided his gaze, her hands trembling as she made tea. "We don't talk about last night," she said firmly, eyes fixed on the floor. "It was a mistake. It never happened." Dwayne nodded slowly. "I know." But as they stood there in the quiet morning, both knew it wasn't that simple. The mistake had been made, but the line had been crossed. And no matter how much they pretended otherwise, something had changed between them. Forever. The weeks that followed were long and thick with silence. Marcia barely looked Dwayne in the eye anymore. She moved around the house like a shadow, quiet, reserved, her usual sharp presence dulled by the weight of what had happened. She stopped sitting in the living room in the evenings. She kept the old record player packed away. If Dwayne lingered in a room too long, she found a reason to leave it. But for all her efforts to create distance, Dwayne did the opposite. He stayed close. He'd started cooking more often, watching her carefully from across the room. If she coughed, he brought her tea. If she looked tired, he insisted she rest while he finished the chores. To the outside world, he seemed like a devoted son-in-law, quietly holding the household together while Sasha was away. But behind closed doors, something unspoken passed between them, an undercurrent of guilt, tension, and a secret neither of them knew how to carry. And then came the nausea. At first, Marcia brushed it off. Maybe it was the food, or stress, or age catching up with her in cruel ways. But then the nausea grew stronger, waves that came in the morning and lingered throughout the day. Her appetite changed. The smell of frying oil turned her stomach. Her breasts felt sore. Then she realized she was late. Over 2 weeks late. She tried to ignore it. But one morning, with her hands trembling, she stood in a pharmacy aisle downtown, sunglasses on, head low. She picked up a pregnancy test and paid in cash, not daring to make eye contact with the cashier. She waited until late that night, when Dwayne was out and the house was still, before taking the test in the bathroom. 2 minutes later, she sat on the closed toilet seat, staring at the little pink lines on the stick. Positive. Her heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst through her chest. Her hands were cold. Her face went pale. She felt like she couldn't breathe. Pregnant. It didn't seem real. Not her age. Not in this way. She stared into the mirror and saw a stranger staring back. One who'd made a decision she never imagined herself capable of, and now she was carrying the consequence in her womb. The child growing inside her wasn't just a child. It was proof. It was betrayal. It was destruction waiting to happen. Sasha returned the next day. She came back from London tired but glowing. Her arms were full of gifts, perfume for Marcia, a new watch for Dwayne, British chocolates and trinkets. She hugged them both tightly, her voice full of excitement and love, completely unaware of the war quietly waging behind their eyes. Marcia forced a smile, but her soul trembled. Dwayne barely spoke that night. But the next morning, he cornered Marcia in the kitchen. His voice was low, urgent. "I know," he said. She didn't answer, but the way she stiffened told him everything. "I saw the test in the trash." She turned away from him, her jaw clenched, her eyes wide with panic. We can't let her know. I won't say a word," he said quickly. "But we need to stay calm. We'll figure it out. I'll help you." "Help me," she hissed. "Ow." "By lying to my daughter until it all explodes in our faces." Dwayne stepped closer, lowering his voice. "We made a mistake, Marcia, but it's done. What happens next, we have to think carefully. No one else needs to get hurt." She looked at him, tears forming in her eyes. "It's too late for that." But for the time being, she said nothing to Sasha. She acted like everything was fine, laughed when she had to, smiled when Sasha shared stories from her trip. But inside, her body was changing, and so was her guilt. What began as a moment of weakness was now growing into something real, undeniable. A secret neither she nor Dwayne could bury for long. And the clock was ticking. Sasha had always considered her home a place of peace, a refuge from the chaos of meetings, flights, and deadlines. But ever since she returned from her month-long business trip, something about the house felt different. At first, she chalked it up to jet lag. But within a week, the signs became too strange to ignore. Her mother, once lively and quick-witted, had become quiet, often retreating to her room for hours. She'd speak in short answers, smile with an edge of forced warmth, and seemed oddly flustered whenever Dwayne entered the room. And Dwayne, he was trying too hard. Flowers randomly appeared in the kitchen. He'd offered to do things Sasha never asked for. Draw her mother a bath, bring her food upstairs, even rub her feet when she complained of soreness. At dinner, the table once full of laughter now echoed with uncomfortable silence. Sasha caught fleeting glances between them, furtive, loaded, then quickly broken with forced small talk. There was one night in particular when a bowl of soup nearly slipped from Marcia's hands, and Dwayne rushed to catch it. Their hands touched, and Sasha saw a flash of something. Not guilt, not fear, something else, something deeper. She tried to ignore it. Maybe she was reading too much into things. She'd just come back from being gone for so long. Perhaps it was just residual tension. But her instincts refused to settle. Then came the discovery. It was a Sunday morning, and Sasha offered to help her mother clean her bedroom. Marcia resisted at first, firmly, but eventually gave in, saying she needed a walk and left Sasha to dust and tidy up. As Sasha moved the dresser slightly to sweep underneath, something caught her eye. An envelope, yellowed and torn, stuffed behind the heavy wood frame. Curiosity got the better of her. She picked it up, opened it. Inside were 3 pregnancy tests, all used. 2 had faint, faded lines, but the third was still clear, a bold positive. Alongside them was a crumpled appointment slip from a women's clinic in downtown Kingston. The date made her stomach twist. 1 month ago, the exact time she had been overseas. Her breath caught in her throat. Her first thought was panic. Was her mother sick? But the test said otherwise. Pregnant? At her age? Questions raced through her mind, fast and unforgiving. Was it a mistake? A health scare? Hormonal imbalance? No. The clinic slip and the tests. Marcia knew exactly what was happening. Sasha's hands trembled as she shoved the envelope back where she found it, her pulse pounding in her ears. She walked out of the room slowly, her thoughts spiraling. Something was very, very wrong. But she said nothing. Not yet. Instead, she watched. She paid closer attention. She studied their interactions, the way Dwayne avoided her eyes, sometimes when she asked him simple questions. The way Marcia excused herself more and more frequently from dinner. And that same look between the two of them, like a shared secret neither could speak of. Sasha didn't want to believe what her gut was telling her. But it was only a matter of time before she'd find out the truth. And when she did, everything would burn. Sasha stood outside the women's clinic with her heart pounding in her chest, the same crumpled appointment slip clenched in her palm. The building was quiet, nondescript, just another beige concrete structure tucked between a pharmacy and a dental office in downtown Kingston. But for Sasha, it loomed like a fortress guarding a secret that could shatter her entire world. She took a deep breath and stepped inside. The receptionist greeted her with a tired smile, and Sasha forced one of her own. "Hi, I'm here checking on my mother's follow-up. Her name is Marcia Gordon. She had an appointment here about a month ago." The receptionist tapped on her keyboard. One moment, Sasha tried not to fidget. Her fingers dug into the side of her purse as she scanned the waiting room. Two young women sitting quietly, a mother bouncing a baby on her lap, a middle-aged man staring at the floor. "Can I ask what this is regarding?" The receptionist finally asked, glancing up. I want to know if everything's okay." "She hasn't said much since the visit," Sasha replied, layering her voice with concern. "She's been acting strangely. I'm worried." The receptionist nodded and disappeared into the back. Moments later, a nurse stepped out, a woman in her early 40s with gentle eyes and a calm demeanor. "I'm Nurse Tanya. You're Marcia Gordon's daughter?" Sasha nodded quickly. "We don't usually disclose information without the patient consent," the nurse began cautiously. "But if your family, I can confirm she came in for a pregnancy consultation and a paternity test." Sasha felt the ground sway beneath her. The nurse hesitated. "The results came in about 2 weeks ago. She didn't list a name for the father, but we recorded the age, 28. Sasha's world stopped. 28. Dwayne. She didn't speak. She couldn't. Her mind exploded in a storm of images. The long glances, the awkward silences, the careful distance her mother and husband now tried so hard to maintain. The puzzle she hadn't wanted to solve had just assembled itself in one brutal second. Numb, she thanked the nurse, left the clinic, and drove home on autopilot. The streets blurred past her. Her hands shook on the steering wheel. Rage clashed with heartbreak. How? How could her own mother? How could Dwayne, her husband, the man she brought into this house, loved, trusted, do something this vile? When she got home, the house was quiet. Marcia was in her room, probably napping. Dwayne was in the backyard, watering the garden. Sasha didn't speak to either of them. She didn't scream or throw accusations. Instead, she watched. For days, she watched the way Dwayne's eyes nervously flicked toward her every time he walked by. She watched how Marcia barely looked up from her tea, her face pale and distant. Sasha said nothing, pretending to be calm, pretending not to know. But every look, every silence, every moment they tiptoed around her only fed the storm inside her chest. She ate with them, slept next to Dwayne, hugged her mother, all while fantasizing about how she would tear their world apart the moment the time was right. The truth was no longer hidden. It lived in her house now, between the cracks of every whispered word, every stolen glance. And it was only a matter of time before it exploded. The tension in the house had thickened to the point where breathing felt like dragging air through mud. Sasha hadn't said a word in days. yet her silence screamed louder than any confrontation. Every step Dwayne took near her was cautious. Every time Marcia looked her way, her lips trembled like she was on the verge of saying something, but never did. Then came a night, everything snapped. It was raining outside, soft, steady, like the calm before a storm. Sasha stood at the kitchen sink, her fingers clenched tightly around a dish. The clink of cutlery in the sink was the only sound in the room. Marcia was seated at the table, sipping lukewarm tea, and Dwayne hovered near the doorway, clearly debating whether to stay or leave the room. Sasha turned slowly, eyes hollow but burning. "How long?" she asked, her voice razor-thin. The question sliced through the air like a blade. Marcia looked up, startled, mouth opening but no words forming. Sasha stepped forward. "How long were you two screwing behind my back?" Dwayne's face paled. "Sasha, please." "It wasn't, don't lie to me," she snapped, pointing a trembling finger at him. "I know. The clinic told me." "The baby is yours, Dwayne." Marcia let out a strangled sob, hands flying to her mouth. "It was a mistake," she whispered. "I swear to you, Sasha. It wasn't supposed to happen." "Then why didn't you tell me?" Sasha's voice cracked. "Why let me sleep beside the man who got my mother pregnant?" Dwayne stepped forward, hands raised. "It was just once. We were drunk. It didn't mean anything. I love you, Sasha. You gotta believe me." Sasha laughed, cold, brittle. "You love me." Her eyes darted between them. "Do you have any idea what you've done to me? To us? You turned my home into a damn soap opera." Marcia stood, reaching out. "Sasha, please, don't touch me." Sasha screamed, backing up toward the counter. "You're my mother. How could you?" Marcia sobbed openly now, staggering toward her daughter. "I was lonely. I was weak. I thought I was going to die alone, and he was kind. I made a terrible mistake, but I never stopped loving you." Sasha's body shook with rage and heartbreak. Her world, everything she had built, was gone, burned down by the two people she trusted most. Her vision blurred as hot tears poured from her eyes. Dwayne reached for her. "We can fix this." "We can fix what?" she shouted, shoving him away. The child growing in her stomach? The lies? The nights I spent calling you while you were screwing my mother? Marcia stepped in between them, trying to calm her, hands on Sasha's shoulders. But Sasha snapped. In one breathless, blind second, driven by grief, betrayal, and rage, Sasha's hand closed around the knife on the counter. "No, Sasha," Marcia gasped, but it was too late. Sasha plunged the blade into her mother's chest. Marcia staggered backward, a look of disbelief on her face as blood bloomed through her shirt. She crumpled to the floor with a sickening thud, the teacup shattering beside her. Dwayne screamed, "What did you do?" But Sasha just stared at her blood-covered hands, the knife clattering to the floor. Dwayne turned and bolted, barefoot, soaked in panic, vanishing into the stormy night, leaving Sasha kneeling beside her dying mother, the kitchen awash in silence and red. The kitchen was still, so quiet it was deafening. Sasha stood frozen, the knife at her feet, her hands stained with blood, her mother's blood. Marcia lay crumpled on the tile, her chest rising in tiny jerks before settling completely still. One eye stared upward, glassy and wide, as if locked in disbelief. Sasha didn't cry. She didn't scream. Her breath came in short, sharp gasps, her heart pounding so hard she could barely hear over it. The air was thick with the iron scent of blood and something else, something heavy, final. Her knees gave out, and she collapsed onto the floor beside Marcia. Her lips moved, whispering something only the dead could hear. Why did you do this to me?" Minutes passed, or maybe hours. The silence broke with a distant voice shouting outside the house. Then came hurried footsteps on gravel. A neighbor's voice rang out, frantic and unsure. "Sasha? Everything all right in there?" She didn't answer. Someone banged on the front door. Another voice joined. Then another. Then came the scream. A woman from next door had peeked through the kitchen window. One look at the blood-slicked floor and Marcia's unmoving body was enough to summon the nightmare. Sirens wailed in the distance. Closer, closer. By the time the police arrived, the yard was crowded with half the neighborhood. People whispered, shouted, speculated. It was the mother, wasn't it? No. I heard it was her husband who ran off with her. She was always so quiet. Inside, the house was chaos turned cold. Officers stormed in with drawn weapons, but they didn't need force. Sasha sat on the floor, back against the kitchen cabinet, arms limp at her sides. Her face was pale, blank, as if her soul had already left her body. She didn't resist. She didn't flinch when they cuffed her, read her rights, or led her through the living room. Past the couch where the three of them once watched movies together, past the table where they'd laughed over curry chicken and festival bread. Blood trailed faintly behind her, tiny droplets from her hands, still wet from the moment she lost everything. Outside, flashing lights lit up the yard in red and blue. Cameras were already out. News vans parked crookedly on the street. Someone shouted her name, snapping photos as she was guided toward the police car. Inside the vehicle, Sasha didn't look back at the house. She didn't think of Dwayne, who had vanished into the night and left only chaos behind. The police had already issued a warrant, but he was gone, like smoke in the rain. Some said he fled to Montego Bay. Others swore he caught a ride to Kingston, or maybe even hopped a flight out of the country. Rumors spread like fire through the town. The woman who killed her own mother. The husband who betrayed them both. A child born of sin and silence. But Sasha heard none of it. Her mind echoed with a single, terrible silence, the moment the knife left her hand. And for the first time, she wondered if the wound she opened that night had actually started long before the blade ever touched skin.